In 1991, nationalism was sweeping through the Balkans, and Yugoslavia, of course, was about to descend into a bloody conflict for about the next 4 or 5 years. And it was in 1991, right at the start of the wars of the former Yugoslavia, that Slovenia fought a 10-day war with Serb forces and achieved its independence the next year, or actually achieved it in 1991. One of its first acts was to declare all citizens other than Slovenes non-citizens. So this was an ethnic-based decision, and it gave those non-Slovene citizens 6 months to apply for citizenship or resident status. The problem was many never heard about the deadline. They didn't think they had to do anything. They'd been living in Slovenia for decades, and they had permanent resident status. But 6 months after that deadline was issued, they were simply erased from the records. Many never found out about it until they went to do something official, like register a car or change their residence. So, as far as the Slovene state was concerned, after 1992, these people didn't exist. Around 26,000 Serbs, Croats, Romani, Hungarians, others who'd been living in Slovenia, were then in a very difficult situation. One of them, talking to the media here, says they were worse off than refugees. That is, they had no papers at all. So many of them obviously moved back to other parts of the former Yugoslavia, or they emigrated. Undoubtedly, I don't have any case histories, but undoubtedly there will be some living in Australia. Others tried to hang on in Slovenia, but they were denied access to basic services like schooling and health. And it's worth noting, again, that these were people who'd lived legally in Slovenia for decades.
Now, the law that has just been agreed on and which offers compensation, how did it come about and what does it offer?
This certainly wasn't a voluntary act by Slovenia to offer this compensation. What happened is that a group of the so-called erased took their case for compensation to the European Court of Human Rights. I think it started back in about 2006. Now, there have been years of battling through the courts, including appeals by the Slovene state. So they would get a ruling, a winning ruling from the European Court of Human Rights. Slovenia would appeal against that ruling. But finally, last year, the Grand Chamber of the court upheld the earlier rulings that Slovenia should pay compensation. So what we've seen in the last few days, in fact on Friday, the law which was agreed on by the coalition government comes about as a direct result of the being told to do this by the European Court of Human Rights. The draft law calls for the creation of a fund, and from that, people who were erased can get compensation. The amount has been pegged at €40 per month, and over a period of 20 years, that would come to about €10,000 for someone making a claim. Now, important to note, the law is still to pass through Parliament, and it's planned to be voted on in September, so it's not quite there yet.
And what's been the reaction from those who lost their citizenship and residency rights?
They're fairly well organised, but they are very unhappy, and they've described the proposed law as insulting, and they're threatening to go back to the European Court. In fact, I think mass claims are already being prepared for the European Court. Firstly, they point out that the award originally, the European Court originally awarded €20,000 in compensation to the ones who made the successful complaint, and that compares to about 10,000 being offered under the government's proposed law. And there's another quite big issue for them, and that is limiting the compensation, apparently, to those who currently live in Slovenia, which I spoke about. That deadline that expired last week means that anyone living outside Slovenia who's hearing about this now seems to be excluded from any chance of getting compensation. The best hope for them looks like going back to the European court, and perhaps also pressure being put on the government to change the proposed compensation law between now, when they've announced the agreement that the coalition government has agreed this is the way it will go, and when it's voted on in September. I guess there's a window of opportunity there for pressure for it to be changed, perhaps for the European Court to offer an opinion on this. But in any case, I don't think the story's over yet. There's a long way to go, because under what has been announced last week in Ljubljana, many people who suffered and who had perhaps property confiscated and left the country in order to start a new life, it would seem very difficult for them to get anything out of this.